Board. Hello everyone and welcome to this webinar, Best Practice for Supporting Learning. This webinar has been put together to give you some general ideas on how you can support in a mainstream classroom, whether you teach or whether you provide one-to-one services or whether you are in a support role where you may be a TA or an LSA. There's some things in here that you'll all be able to take on board, perhaps refresh and remind yourself of the things that are good practice, and do the best you can for all of your learners, no matter what age they are. Just a quick background to me. I started teaching too many years ago to remember now, but it was an evening class to begin with when my children were very small, and then I went into full-time, and I worked in some classes. I worked with adults with learning disabilities, and I learnt a huge amount of how I had to rein in all my own personal goals for their achievement and then look at the individual and what worked best for them. And when I was back into mainstream, I worked with learners who were particularly disengaged, and some of it was because they had an unmet need, and that often was a learning style in that way, or it could have been some kind of a cognitive disability which translated itself into finding it difficult to learn in our general classroom environment. So we're going to kind of scratch the surface with that this morning. We're going to look at practical ideas and support procedures, and this is going to help them to improve their study skills, but also we need to look at the factors that affect learning. You know, that is so important. That age-old saying, you can't judge a book by the cover. My goodness me, just because somebody is that age or in that key stage or, you know, that year group, it doesn't mean that they are a typical learner. There are lots of things that individuals might bring with them to the classroom that affects their learning. We also know that in some cases people who have extra learning needs find it difficult to learn independently. They're quite sort of dependent on someone to help them with that. So although we're not going to go into that in too much detail, there are some things you can try. Then we're going to look at some support methods. Proofreading is one of them, from all ages, people being able to check their work. Increased concentration, a couple of ideas about that, and engagement and checking understanding. So let's kick off with the factors that affect learning. And from my perspective, there are a number here that apply to many people who perhaps don't do very well. The top one would apply perhaps to somebody, and I work with a lot of students who have ADHD, for example. They've learned over the years that they're actually comparing themselves with others, and they find themselves lacking, so they lose their own confidence and they stop trying. So the negative experiences that someone brings to your classroom, whether they're an adult learner or a child or a teenager, that all has a difference, and if they haven't done well and they compare, as I say, with others, they're going to look at you and say, well, what are you going to do differently? What are you going to do differently for me? And they might even wait and see, and then perhaps withdraw emotionally from your lesson if they don't get what they need. Sometimes that shows in poor behaviour, but other times it just means opting out, you know, heads on the table, etc. So processing and retention, that's for like dyslexia, ADHD, autism, a lot of these special educational needs that we're learning much more about in the mainstream classroom, but you can't tell that someone has these difficulties just by looking at them. So we need to kind of dig down a bit further. So I've pulled up this information sheet here. This shows symptoms of dyslexia. Now you can have a look through here. Obviously the one that we all know about is the reading, writing and spelling, but there's other things here, and I think it'd be interesting for you to just take a moment to scroll through. The red arrows in particular, zoning out, daydreaming. They prefer activities when they're learning. One of the red arrow on the right down here, that's difficulty reading a traditional clock. That's a sign. Time management, procrastination. Ooh, procrastination. Have you ever met any students who have problems with learning who procrastinate? Well, let me think now. Anyway, so these are symptoms of dyslexia, but the red arrows also cross over with someone who has ADHD, which is a neurological condition. It's the way you process information. So if you look at these symptoms, you could pick out someone who's withdrawing from your class because they may not have a diagnosis of dyslexia, but maybe they've got poor literacy skills. And then you know that they need something slightly different. And then I've also got this factor that affects learning, which is the fixed mindset. So if you imagine you've always had what's been going on before, you've always had that. So I love this saying, the belief that your potential was determined at birth. It means that it doesn't matter what you do, it's not going to change. So they haven't got a growth mindset. They don't try challenges. They give up easily. They ignore negative feedback, thinking that it doesn't matter. So they don't look at how to change things because they're not going to do any better anyway. So this is a kind of emotional baggage around the learning experience. So there is a fixed mindset going on, and that is a factor that affects learning most definitely. And here we have got the social and emotional aspects of learning. If you come to your class with lots of negative feelings about yourself, it may be that the emotional side of learning is the bit that you need to pick up on. So they have to feel they get lots of encouragement. They don't feel stupid for asking questions. And we should never have a culture of that. Every question is worth asking. I've observed a lot of classrooms, and I hate to say it, but a lot of sniggering goes on when people don't know what they're supposed to do. And so in the end they stop asking and don't ever learn because they feel awkward about asking. So there's emotional aspects of learning which we need to take on board as well, and we need to flip that thought process, and people need to feel that they can ask questions, that they're making progress, and they get lots of encouragement. It might take a bit longer for that. It's kind of like a slow burn, but you will get a better outcome if you provide that social and emotional aspect. So one of the things I've also known about independent learning, remember I was saying before about how when you get over supported, perhaps in the years when you are dealing with young people who've got some kind of additional support need, learning support need, that we tend to over support them in order to get them through. We're judged on outcomes in lots of cases, and we over support them in order to get them through, to get them to achieve. But what it does mean is that they're not very independent in their thinking. And I quite like this. In fact, I recommend this website, joannemarrsconsulting.co.uk, because on this website you'll find lots of ways to promote independent learning, and here is one of them that I've used often, and it really works. No matter what the age, if you show your students the next topic or module for the class that's coming up, if you show them that and ask them to tell you that when they see them next time, you want 4 questions. You want them to think about what they want to know about this subject. That helps them to think ahead. They're thinking about the next lesson already. They're not just going to turn up and expect everyone to do everything for them. So give that a try. Show students the next topic, and then go from there. Ask them for 4 questions. Note-taking then. Now, what I do know about note-taking is that some people, especially those who've got dyslexia and things like that, they say their writing is like a spider across the page, but also they think so much faster than they can write. So they end up not actually having any proper notes taken down at all. And one of the things that people always say is that you should be able to respond to things or take notes in ways other than writing, which sounds a bit mad, but I think that the other point here is that to recognise barriers to listening and do an audit. Sit in your learning environment, whether it's the classroom or a workshop or wherever it is that you do it. If you run apprenticeships and you're a workplace assessor, then look at the situation. Close your eyes, listen to the factors that can distract. It could be noise, but it might be flickering lights that you can even see through your eyelids. It may be that there's low-level noise from other people in the class. They are barriers to listening in order to make notes. And you miss great chunks of things, you know, if someone's talking to you. Also, I think you should provide a keyword definition sheet. So I've put the second point, busting the jargon and retrieving the points. Lots of people can't remember what some keywords mean. And no matter what age group you teach or you support, you could provide a keyword definition sheet where they write the keyword down and then they write in the other side of the sheet what it means. And then every time you use the keywords, you say, get your keyword definition sheet out now and let's go through. And then you go back over it and then they can remember what you're saying. Because that is jargon. When you're learning a new subject, a new topic, it's jargon to the people who don't know much about it. Helping them to stay focused could be keeping it real, keeping it lively, keeping it light-hearted, or putting little stories into your discussions when people are taking notes. And finally, use a spidergram, mind maps. You know, I did one 2 days ago, and I've always done them. They help me so much to concentrate. And if you teach your students how to do that, in other words, use the board for it, or get them to use a sheet of paper and do their own mind map. Show them how to do it. Think of the keyword or think of the topic, and then put your little spidery bits out. It helps them to make notes. There's more than one way to do it. So with proofreading, which I think is important as well, at all ages, people find it difficult to find their own errors. They really do. And if you've ever typed something up and someone's asked you to check it and you've checked it and then you think actually that's fine, but someone else checks it and they find those typos, don't they? And it's usually because you fail to spot your own, and I'll show you why in a moment. But get people to practice and use word searches. I know they've been overdone in the past. Classes I've observed, you know, in the sort of secondary and further sectors, you can't just keep bringing out word searches to keep your class quiet, but I think it is useful if you're learning new keywords and subjects and you want to help them to proofread, because if you can find words in a word search, that's kind of a dual coding connection, which I'll tell you more about in a second. It's not all that good for people with dyslexia, because the words kind of swim across the page for them. So I wouldn't recommend it for everybody, but I think that people who find it difficult to remember things or difficult to read their own work could benefit from that. And if you look, I've put here teachersdirect.co.uk. They've got a word search maker, so you can put your own keywords in. You can put a large word search together, a small word search together, whatever you like. You can make one individually for your learners on your subjects. Creating checklists. I don't know anyone who's an adult who time to time doesn't make a list. The reason we make lists is because we know we're going to forget. So checklist could be something like, have you checked punctuation? Have you checked capital letters and full stops? Have you checked long sentences should be broken up? You know, that's the kind of proofreading we should be instilling in our students, so that that's a study skill for life, that is. Check your own work. So a checklist for checking. How's that, eh? So here's an example of what I was saying about the barriers to finding errors. Now, you've probably seen this before. It's one of those weird pieces of text which is all muddled up. Can you read this? If you can read this, you have a strange mind too. I couldn't believe that I could actually understand what I was reading. The phenomenal power of the human mind, la 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 la. So that Cambridge University piece, you can find that anywhere on the internet. If you look at that, you can understand what's going on here. As long as you've got the first letter and the last letter in the right place, and we have a reasonable level of reading and comprehension, you can understand what's being said. And that is why we often miss some of those errors in the work that the typing that we do ourselves. So that's one thing there. I mean, from my perspective, it's you know, it's easy to read that. I don't know if anyone would find it. Perhaps someone with dyslexia might find it difficult. I don't know, but that is one of the reasons why. So let's look at increasing concentration. And one of the problems with concentration is when people find it difficult to understand what they're doing, their mind starts to wander. When I've been to lessons and classes myself, and I've really enjoyed the topic, and I've really been engaged, and I really have had lots of things to do physically, and loads of connections to make, I come away thinking, wow, that went quickly. So I don't need to think about concentrating because it just happens naturally. One of the jobs we have as teaching and supporting is to help our learners of all ages to feel like they're present in the moment. And there's some ways you can do that. And a good study skill is being able to remember what you've learned. And people say, well, I just come away and I don't remember anything. My memory's so bad. Especially those who've got a cognitive or neurological condition that prevents that from happening. So our job is to think of ways to bring together the learning in a way that people are going to remember it. So a good study skill is to think about the different ways that people remember. So we've got different memory banks. So to understand that and to improve your memory, we need to know what they are. So episodic memory is our personal experiences, so things we've done. So I would say we need to combine two ways of presenting new information, applying the connection from something that we've done now to something we've done previously. So something we're doing now. Ask the question, have any of you ever done any of these before? Do you know what this means? Have you seen this in your life? You know, try and ask questions around that and make the connection. Semantic memory is facts. You know, we talk about when we're at school, we learn things by rote, the times table. So if you were to connect your knowledge, capital cities, I mean, I'll go back to the previous slide. You know, we've got one here of the Eiffel Tower, and most places in the world, if you're doing capital cities, for example, you could connect a picture with the name. Does that make sense? So you're trying to make connections. So never just provide text, always provide a picture with the text or a memory with your verbal explanation. Here's some more here. Procedural memory. This is how we remember how to do things. You know when you say you never forget how to ride a bike once you've learned how to ride it. You get on a bike and you might be a bit rusty when you're riding it. You haven't ridden one for a long time, but you know how to do it. You know how to do it. You kind of remember, and that's your procedural memory. So when you can walk and talk through things, and if you're doing a practical subject in your learning, then that's really easy because you're going to be setting up. You start off slowly, like when you learn to drive. You do a few things, and then you do a few more things, and you do a few more things. And you build up knowledge based on your present experience or your present knowledge. So the iconic thought then is thinking based on using mental images and remembering visually. All of this combined is what we're talking about in terms of dual coding. So you do a double event. It's a video and a discussion, it's pictures, it's activities. It helps to bring somebody into a place where they can remember what they've learned, and that is a study skill. They can encourage those connections. So hopefully you'll think about doing some of those when you're preparing for learning. And in a way you could say that this is like a reboot. It definitely helps to improve engagement if you reboot, to kind of like refresh yourself by changing the pace of the class, alter the activity a little bit. Could be, you know, getting people up and out of their seats, to stick post-it notes on the wall, or get them up to say yes or no to questioning. Anything. It's a reboot. It helps engagement, helps to remind it. It's a dual coding opportunity. So use verbal and visual. It's like your brain gym. And obviously with that goes variety. Now, I've got loads of things here, so when you come to play this back, you'll be able to copy and paste some of those links, but I'll explain what these things are. So one of the good things about variety is when you can help your students to become more independent by logging on and answering questions that you've set them. So the first one here, you could use a survey type of question, And there's a hyperlink there to SurveyMonkey, which obviously is no good if you if you're not using the hyperlink. But if you type SurveyMonkey into your browser, it's absolutely free to use, and you can create a questionnaire and with multiple choice if you want, or whatever. And the beauty of it is it creates a short link which you can send to your students. So this is a really nice way of keeping it IT. That's the way they like to do it sometimes. And they will be able to answer the questions that way. Okay, so that why not? The fill the gap, you can, if you've got hot potatoes wherever it is that you work, it's a program, by the way, Hot Potatoes, you can create some fill the gap exercises. And this is just another way of finding out what your students know, checking their understanding. It helps to improve engagement because they might have to select a word from a group of words and place the word into the gap. So give that a try. I think there may be a license fee for that, but if you work in a department, why not give that a go? Find out. Your library might even have it already, might even have license to use it. I recommend giving it a try. There's also Blockbusters. You know that TV programme when you say, "I'll have a pea please, Bob"? Well, if you got the link here, teachersdirect.co.uk/resources/quizbusters. It's a really nice idea to get your students into teams. I've got doorbells where they, different sounding doorbells where they can vote. So we have the Blockbuster questionnaire up on the screen in the classroom, and we go into groups and we have an adjudicator and we ring the bell to answer the question. Okay, so you can make it related to your own subject. Go and have a look at that. It's brilliant, and I'll tell you, your students will definitely be engaged. And obviously if they know the answers, then you are checking their understanding as well. Activity bags are great. If you've ever been on any of my training courses, you'll know that I often finish the session with a consolidation activity which includes questioning bags. So just like the paper bags that you get from the takeaway shops, I got loads of those. I put questions on the front of the bag, staple them on. It might be that there's a task inside the bag. So you get your people into groups, and then you do the question, give them 3 minutes for each bag, then you move the bag on. So you get a new bag with a new question. So you get people into groups. We go clockwise, maybe 4 bags. Okay, so if it's 3 minutes per bag, you know that you've got a set amount of time in your lesson plan for that. I love flip charts around the room. Or on the table. Get people to move, get your students to move. There could be questions, could be a mind map on there, and you ask them to add to them as they go round. Those sort of things are great. And obviously that last one here, Kahoot. If you've never heard of Kahoot, where have you been? Get online to that, and you can get Kahoot and download it. I bet your students would really enjoy that. You could have it on the board. It doesn't have to be individual voting panels, but if they've got phones, if you're working with older students and they've got phones, they can all log in to the game and play that way. But find out more about all of these things. I haven't invented them, I've just discovered them like everyone else has. But what I'm suggesting here is that the factors that affect learning are that we do it all the same way all the time, and try and mix it up by giving some variety. Now before we finish, I just want to talk to you about this fantastic Skills for Learning Support Practitioners program that we do. So if you work with students and who've got a variety of mainstream additional learning needs, then you can learn a lot from this, and it won't make you an expert, but it will certainly give you a level 2 qualification. And the way it works is that we've covered all of these subjects. So if you can see here, there are lots of different things here, and most of them are for mainstream classrooms. So you could easily cover these sort of subjects. So the way this particular program works is that you have to do the mandatory unit, which is the role of the learning support practitioner, and then you take 2 of the others. And so to get the award, you have to do 3 modules, and you choose from the ones that perhaps you are most working with, perhaps, or that maybe you are going to shortly. Anyway, so the level 2 qualification, it's accredited by OCN London, who are big players in the short course qualification game, and we support you through the learning. So a lot of it is online, distance learning, and you get tutorials via email and webinar driven learning. So it's all really good. So get in touch if you want to find out more about that. Get in touch, info@can-do-behaviour.co.uk. Thanks a lot. Bye for now.